and welcome back to Forgotten Hollywood in my living room. Long time no see. A bit of an explanation. The month of November was basically a time torn between the holiday and preparing for that and dealing with colds going through my entire household. Everyone got sick. I lost my voice for 3 days. It was bad. Now I can finally move on just as we're going into the next holiday season. So I love Christmas time. I love December and all the things that come with it. If I don't post, just know it's the holidays. I have a family. Priorities. Today I would like to address the 2004 musical version of A Christmas Carol, starring Kelsey Grammer. It's a made-for-TV movie, and it is definitely the worst version of A Christmas Carol I have ever seen. And I have seen the first version of A Christmas Carol ever made. I think it was 1909. And Marley's ghost was the only ghost in the entire movie. And it was a guy literally wearing a sheet. I prefer that to what we got in the 2004 version. Here's why. Charles Dickens wrote his book in 1843. For the record, that is 151 years before the musical was made. The issue comes when you try to adapt it, when you try to update, modernize. Now, there are ways to do it, and there are ways to do it well. This was not one of them. This version was supposed to be set in the time period of the book, 1843. It was supposed to capture Victorian England and the look and feel of Victorian England while still being enjoyable to modern audiences. Which, honestly, you really don't have to change A Christmas Carol much, because in 150 plus years, people still like it. Actually, at this point, it's closer to 170 years. Still, people like it. When you were trying to set A Christmas Carol in 1843, when the story took place, there's certain things you need to do. People looking, sounding, and acting like they did in 1843, or it brings you out of the story. And just as an example of why this is an issue, is the first sequence was the stock exchange. You see a man bringing his daughter to the stock exchange, which probably didn't happen, or it didn't happen much if it did happen, but there was a reason for it. I was like, okay, he is trying to get sympathy from Scrooge. He has his daughter with him. That's a sympathy angle. He's working a game. It's good. That's fine. All the random women standing around holding their Christmas presents. No, I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, obviously they were going to do the song and dance number of "It's Christmas Eve, yay, it's Christmas Eve." And they have their gifts, and they could have done that musical number on the street and then transitioned into the stock exchange if they wanted to incorporate everyone. But in the stock exchange, you wouldn't have women just standing around holding gifts. It wouldn't have happened in 1943, much less 1843. It just, I have this sort of pet peeve about hair in period dramas, because if you look at the men, they generally look like they did in the time that they're going for. Look at men's clothing. It generally looks like it did in the time that they're going for. You look at women's hair and clothing, not so much. Everything has to be updated. Here's why. The reason they do that is because they are trying to match the standard of beauty at the time the movie is made. Watch any Western made in the 60s or 70s, and you will see women with hairstyles of the 60s and 70s. You know, they practically have beehive updos, and it's supposed to be 1869. more like 1969. Jennifer Love Hewitt plays Emily, who is the love interest of Scrooge in the past sequence, and she has an asymmetrical hairstyle where her curls on one side come up to here, and her curls on the other side go to here, except one curl which goes all the way down to here. So it looks like she had her hair set, slept on it, and then went to the party. No. No. So that was an issue for me. And because we know what the people were supposed to look like. The first edition in 1843 was illustrated. All the characters were drawn out to Dickens specifications. Here's what they look like. The biggest problem, even more so than Emily's hair, was the ghosts. First you have Marley. I guess when you dye, your hair becomes 10 times bigger. Interesting makeup choice. But the thing that got to me about Marley was the chains. He wasn't burned by them at all. He could move around just fine. And the whole point of the chains is that they weigh him down. Now, he says they weigh a ton as he's dancing around the room. There's a disconnect. But then you've got the Ghost of Christmas Past, who looks like she's going to an awards show in 2004. And now maybe that's what they were going for. They were like, we want to do something new and fresh, but it just... Again, the book was illustrated. We know what it's supposed to look like. The original description in the book lends itself to be able to be easily played by a man or a woman. It's usually played by a man, but I have seen it done well played by a woman. However, they are supposed to be light, the light of truth. And they have the cap, which Scrooge has forced on them to hide the light so he can live in his darkness. And then you've got this woman in this very modern, almost slinky dress. And at one point, it looked like she was trying to pole dance on Scrooge's bedpost. It was just awkward and weird and didn't fit the Ghost of Christmas Past. Then we go on to the Ghost of Christmas Present, who was played by a black man. Didn't bother me at all. He did very well in the role, and he looked the part. They had the hair right, they had the makeup right, they had the costume right, he had the robe, he had the wreath in his hair. He pulled it off. He did great. That one, no issue. Then you get to the Ghost of Christmas Future. And this is the easiest look to pull off. You literally throw a black sheet on an actor and you've got the Ghost of Christmas Future. I'm pretty sure I have seen versions where that was how they did the costume. It was just a black sheet draped over the actor and they would point. Easy. This was played by a woman. Don't mind that. It's fine. But it was played by a woman dressed in what I could best describe as a Halloween Depot mummy costume. She was all in white, and it was just like strips and rags and stuff. That maybe they were trying to counter her other look because each of the ghosts ran into Scrooge earlier in the movie. I am a little weirded out by the fact that Scrooge met the ghosts before he even met Marley, when traditionally Marley sent the ghosts, but they could have been trying to contrast that, she was draped all in black with being draped all in white. But it didn't lend itself to being the Ghost of Christmas Future. She looked like a ghost for sure. Well, she looked more like a mummy than a ghost, but it didn't fit. And speaking of not fitting, you've got the songs. Now, I love musicals. Love them. I did not love this because the songs, they made me feel like I was at a happy Broadway musical. It would be like, okay, we're going to do Jaws the musical, and we're going to have happy, peppy song and dance numbers lamenting the loss of the victims. Uh, why? There are certain stories that just don't lend themselves to be happy Broadway musicals. Can you make them a musical? Yes. And they have. It can be done. But this one, especially two songs in it. Uh, well, really three, but that was a full scene for the third one. But the first song that didn't fit and didn't work was Marley's song. Because Marley's scene is a scene about remorse, repentance, penitence, sorrow, grief, all of that. And you've got this happy little dance number with all these ghosts wrapped in chains. And then they cast Jason Alexander as Marley on top of that. I have never seen him in anything but comic relief. I'm sure he can do drama if he really wanted to, but this they did as comic relief. And Marley is not comic relief. Marley is the warning bells. Now, to Kelsey Grammer's credit, he played the scene as if he was horrified and if everything was terrifying, but it came off as almost overacting because everybody was happy and just dancing, and it just so much disconnect. It was just bad. The second song that didn't fit was in the Ghost of Christmas Present sequence. Now, again, like I said, I had no issue with the Ghost of Christmas Present himself. He was fine. The issue I had is Scrooge cannot interact with the past, the present, or the future. He's viewing it strictly as an observer. When he went in, he was literally shoved into this dance number where they were interacting with him. And he was interacting with the other people, except he wasn't there. I'm sitting here going, wait. So is he actually in Christmas Day on the stage and nobody notices? What's going on? Because he's actually like, people are touching him. He is touching things. Also, this is the first time he shows generosity before he has actually seen anything to make him feel generous. Except this one girl. Grace Smythe, whose mother has just passed away, and Scrooge is evicting her father. And honestly, she's featured more than Tiny Tim. I think she's in more scenes than any other character except Scrooge. But she's there, and Scrooge sees her, and he feels compassion towards her because her mother died and stuff, so he gives her the present that he received earlier in the scene. To me, this implies that Scrooge was already becoming a good guy before he had experienced anything to make him a good guy. I mean, he had seen the past, but that just made him remorseful. It didn't make him generous or anything like that, or really realize that he could make a difference. Except the song told him that he could give to other people, so the song taught him how to be generous. So it just, and then there was the sequence in the graveyard. And this is where I go back to, I'm watching a Broadway musical in the theater. And the reason I specify watching a Broadway musical in the theater is because a lot of the action, a lot of the songs and dance numbers are done as if they are done on a stage for a live audience. Like the gravediggers are digging in an actual graveyard, like soil, trees, everything. It's all around them. You can see that this is like a location, or at least supposed to be. But not one of them actually puts their shovel into the soil, and the hole is already dug. They're just doing the motions of digging a hole that has already been dug, and The camera angle is such that you can clearly see none of them are scooping up soil. And this is classic stage technique, except on the stage you would hide the fact that they're not actually digging in the soil because you want people to think they're digging in the soil. This didn't hide it at all, so it just sort of killed that whole effect. The whole sequence, it included people dancing on Scrooge's grave, which I don't like so much. And then he sees his dead mother and his dead sister, except his dead sister is like 10, only she lived long enough to have a son. So unless they're implying she had her son when she was 10 and then died, I don't know why her ghost would be 10. And there's all these people singing to Scrooge. I wasn't clear on who they were. I could not follow that sequence very well. And then his mother shows up. And it's like, is this about Scrooge or is this about something else? Is this about being remorseful and wanting to change? Or is this about dealing with your past? Or I just felt that they missed the whole point, they missed the mark on what the story is about. Now, this movie did get some things right. Number one, Kelsey Grammer. He was great in his acting, good singer, and they were really good at establishing the character. Like in the first sequence, you see him, he keeps yelling at Bob Cratchit for having a cold and telling him to get rid of it, as if it's something he can just cast off and move on with his life. And beyond that, well, I already said I liked the Ghost of Christmas Present. Yeah, that's about what they got right. Kelsey Grammer and the Ghost of Christmas Present was pretty good. So a few other things I'd like to address with this. This is not the first time that Scrooge met ghosts before he met Marley. Usually it's done as it's someone he has interacted with, someone who's in the real world, who he knows personally. The actor doubles as the ghost, and to say he's projecting the image, or the ghost is taking an image from his mind to have a physical form. The difference in this one is it actually seemed like the ghosts were spirits. They knew what was coming. They knew who he was. They knew what they were going to do the morning of Christmas Eve when he runs into them. All in all, they tried to make a good musical adaptation of A Christmas Carol. Did they succeed? Not in my opinion, no. Because they were going for Broadway Happy Musical, and they picked the wrong story. Now, I'm not saying that you can't change things. You can't adapt the story. You can't deviate any little minuscule bit from the source material. It's going too far, is what I'm talking about. Now, I plan to do a video later this week where I'm going to talk about my top 10 versions of A Christmas Carol. And some of them take quite a few liberties, yet they're still among my favorites. So I'm not saying you can't change anything, but there's limits. You know, if you're going to do an adaptation of Frosty the Snowman, you're not going to set it in the Bahamas. There's no snow. You can't go that far off. It just doesn't work. So, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if you've seen this version and what your thoughts are on it. And be sure to check out my videos later this week where I'm going to be addressing my favorite versions of A Christmas Carol. And I have a special double feature that I am very excited about. Be sure to like and subscribe and click the bell for notifications because YouTube is notorious for not telling people when someone uploads. And thank you for sticking with me through my time of not posting during illness and holidays. and I will catch up with you next time.